I've led supply convoys through snow in Poland. I've handled equipment shortages 2 days before inspections. I've stood in front of 40 soldiers and made decisions that actually mattered. None of that shook me the way one phone call did 3 months before my wedding. Daniel proposed on a windy evening in Denver. Nothing dramatic. No orchestra hiding in the bushes. Just him, a sapphire ring, and a quiet question that felt steady and certain. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. For the first time in a long time, I felt like something in my life was simple. That night after we called his parents, I stared at my phone for a while before calling my dad. We don't talk every day. Our conversations are polite, safe, mostly updates about work and weather. But this felt different. He answered on the second ring. When I told him I was getting married, he paused for a second, then laughed in that low, surprised way he does when something catches him off guard. He sounded proud. Not distracted, not rushed. Then I asked him the question I'd been holding in my throat. Will you walk me down the aisle? There was a longer pause that time. I braced myself for a practical answer. A calendar check. A soft maybe. Instead, he said, "Of course I will. I wouldn't miss that for anything." It hit me harder than I expected. I was standing in my kitchen in Army PT shorts, staring at my refrigerator, and suddenly I was 14 again, wanting my dad to choose me for once without hesitation. After my mom died when I was 14, everything shifted. Grief does strange things to people. My dad buried himself in work. My older sister Lauren stepped into the role of emotional translator, the one who always seemed to know what he needed before he said it. Lauren is 3 years older than me. Confident, social. The kind of person who can network in a grocery store checkout line. I was the quieter one, the one who preferred a book to a crowd, the one who left home for ROTC and never really moved back. When I commissioned as a second lieutenant, Dad sent flowers. He didn't come. When I deployed to Poland, he texted me to stay safe. Lauren drove him to the airport once when he had a conference in Chicago. She told me about it later like it was proof she was the responsible one. I stopped expecting him at certain milestones. It hurt less that way. But this felt different. He didn't hesitate. He didn't say he'd try. He said he wouldn't miss it for anything. I believed him. Planning the wedding was the easy part. Daniel and I picked a venue at the Denver Botanic Gardens. Simple outdoors, not over the top. I wasn't interested in turning it into a military parade. I just wanted a normal day. Friends, family, good food, a dress I could walk in without needing a spotter. When I told Lauren this date, she said it sounded cute. That's her word for anything she doesn't take seriously. She works in real estate in Dallas. Her social media makes it look like she owns half the city. Designer blazers, rooftop cocktails, hashtags about hustle. In real life, she's good at what she does, but she's also good at selling the image of success. At first she acted supportive, asked about the guest list, made a few comments about whether the ceremony would be too traditional. I ignored it. We're different people. That's fine. A few weeks later, I got a group text from her. Big news. I've been invited to speak at a major real estate conference in Dallas. It's huge. National exposure. I typed back congratulations. Then I saw the date she attached. June 15th, my wedding day. I assumed it was a coincidence. Conferences happen all the time. But something in my stomach tightened. Later that night, Dad called me. Lauren has a big opportunity, he said. She's speaking at a conference. This could be career-defining for her. I waited for the part where he said it didn't matter because he'd already committed to me. He didn't say that. I told her I already promised you, he added quickly. But she's worked hard for this. Worked hard. I have nothing against hard work. I built my career on it. But weddings are scheduled a year in advance. Keynote speakers don't usually get announced 3 months before an event, unless something changes. Are you still coming? I asked. Of course, he said. I just need to figure out logistics. Logistics. I handle Army logistics for a living. You can move equipment across countries with the right planning. A flight from Dallas to Denver is not a tactical puzzle. Still, I let it go. In the weeks that followed, small things started happening. An aunt texted me asking if I was doing a non-traditional ceremony without the father-daughter walk. I hadn't said that to anyone. A cousin asked if I was okay with Dad maybe being a little late. I hadn't mentioned any of that either. When I called Lauren to ask what she'd been telling people, she brushed it off. I just said you're independent. You don't need anyone to walk you anywhere. That's a compliment. It didn't feel like one. I started noticing how often she framed me as the self-sufficient one, the strong one, the one who didn't need Dad as much as she did. It's a convenient story if you want to justify why he shows up for you instead. Daniel noticed I was quieter than usual. He asked if I was worried about the wedding. I'm worried about the seating chart, I told him. That was easier than explaining 30 years of family dynamics. A week later, Dad called again. He sounded tired. I'm looking at flights, he said. It's tight. Tight, how? Well, Lauren's event starts that morning. My ceremony started at 4 in the afternoon. You could come here first, I said carefully, then fly out. Silence. I just don't want to disappoint her, he replied. There it was. The word he never used about me. Disappoint. I stood in my kitchen again. Same refrigerator, same floor tiles, feeling that old 14-year-old ache start to crawl back up my chest. I understand, I said. I didn't, but I said it anyway. He told me he'd call me back once he figured things out. I hung up and stared at my phone, wondering how many times in a lifetime a father can promise something sacred before the word promise stops meaning anything at all. I set my phone down on the counter and stood there longer than I needed to, staring at my reflection in the microwave door, like it might have answers. The thing about disappointment is that it rarely shows up as something new. It feels familiar, like muscle memory. After my mom died, our house got quieter. Not peaceful quiet, careful quiet. The kind where everyone watches what they say because one wrong word might break someone. My dad handled it by working more. He left earlier, came home later, and buried himself in client calls and market reports. He didn't talk about feelings. He talked about numbers. Lauren handled it differently. She stayed close to him. She started managing things. Dinner schedules, appointments, even who called and when. If I asked Dad something, she'd often answer for him. He's tired. He already has plans. He doesn't need to hear that right now. At 14, I didn't see it as control. I saw it as her stepping up. At 17, she had her driver's license and opinions about everything. She'd drive Dad to events, sit beside him at community dinners, laugh at his jokes. People would tell her how strong she was for taking care of him. No one ever said that about me. When I joined ROTC in college, Dad looked surprised more than anything else. Are you sure, he asked? That's a big commitment. It was. That's why I chose it. The Army was simple in a way my family wasn't. You show up. You do your job. You earn your place. There are expectations, and they're clear. If someone says they'll be somewhere, they're there. When I commissioned, Lauren posted a photo of me in uniform with a caption about how proud she was of her little sister. Dad commented underneath. He didn't come to the ceremony. He had a client retreat that weekend. At the time, I told myself it was fine. I was an adult. I didn't need my father clapping in the audience to validate my choices. But validation and presence are not the same thing. When I deployed to Poland 2 years later, I called him the night before I left. He told me to be careful. Lauren texted me a long paragraph about how brave I was and how she couldn't imagine living that way. She also added, Dad's been really stressed. Try not to call too much. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Try not to call too much. Like I was a burden. In Poland, I was responsible for coordinating supply movements across multiple bases. I handled delayed shipments, language barriers, and winter conditions that made Colorado look mild. When something broke, we fixed it. When plans changed, we adjusted. Clarity. Accountability. Back home, things were softer. Slippery. Lauren built her real estate career fast. She was good at selling homes because she was good at selling stories. She understood what people wanted to hear. She told Dad she was building something stable. She told extended family she was the one who stayed close. She told me I was lucky I got to travel and avoid responsibility. Avoid responsibility. I paid my own bills at 19. I signed contracts the Army could legally hold me to. I supervised soldiers older than me by 24. But because I didn't live within a 10-minute drive of my father, I was the independent one. The one who didn't need as much. Over the years, small things added up. family dinners scheduled around Lauren's availability, holiday plans adjusted because she really needed Dad there. When I visited, I felt like a guest. When she visited, she acted like the host. It wasn't explosive, it was subtle, and subtle things are harder to fight. By the time Daniel proposed, I had already lowered my expectations in quiet ways. I didn't expect Dad to attend every ceremony. I didn't expect him to understand my job. But a wedding is different. In our family, my mom had always talked about that walk down the aisle. She'd point at bridal magazines and grocery store lines and tease me about what kind of dress I'd choose someday. It wasn't about tradition for tradition's sake. It was about presence. A father standing beside his daughter when she steps into a new life. Lauren knew that, which is why her career-defining conference landing on my wedding date didn't feel random. One evening about 2 months before the wedding, I was on FaceTime with Dad while he sat at his kitchen table. Lauren walked through the background in business clothes, phone pressed to her ear. He muted me for a second to answer her question. I watched them talk. She leaned close, showed him something on her screen. He nodded. When he unmuted, he seemed distracted. Lauren's just confirming some details for Dallas, he said. For the conference, I asked. Yeah, it's a big deal. I kept my voice even. Have you seen the agenda? He frowned slightly. What do you mean? Just wondering when she's speaking. He shrugged. I'm sure she'll send it. That answer stuck with me. In the Army, you don't say I'm sure about timelines. You verify. A few days later, my aunt texted me again. This time she said, your sister mentioned you might not want a big father-daughter moment. I just want you to know we'll support whatever you choose. I hadn't chosen that. I called Lauren. She laughed like I was overreacting. I just told them you're modern. You don't need to be handed off like property. Relax. That word. Handed off. She knew exactly what she was doing. Reframing something meaningful as outdated. Making me look unreasonable if I insisted on it. I hung up feeling like I was arguing about air. There was nothing concrete to grab onto. Just tone, implication, suggestion. Daniel tried to stay neutral. He doesn't come from a complicated family. His parents show up. Period. One night over dinner, he asked gently, do you think your sister wants your dad at her event more than you want him at the wedding? It was a fair question. The answer wasn't simple. It wasn't about wanting. It was about pattern. And patterns don't change because you print invitations. I went to bed that night replaying every major moment in my life where Lauren had positioned herself as the one who needed him more. And I realized something uncomfortable. She wasn't trying to compete with me. She was trying to make sure there was never a choice at all. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me alert. When you work in logistics, you learn to watch patterns. Delays don't just happen. Equipment doesn't disappear. There's usually a cause. You just have to look closely enough. Lauren sent out a formal email about her conference a few days later. Not just to Dad, to extended family. Subject line in all caps, National Real Estate Summit, Dallas. She included a graphic with her name in bold letters under featured speakers. It looked official, professional, impressive. Dad forwarded it to me with a short message, see big opportunity. I zoomed in on the graphic. It wasn't a screenshot from an official site. It looked like something made in Canva. Clean, polished, but generic. I didn't say that. Instead, I asked, have you booked your flight yet? I'm still comparing options, he replied. Lauren's event starts at 9 a.m. Your ceremony is at 4 p.m. It's tight. Denver to Dallas is under 2 hours by plane. Even factoring airport time, it wasn't impossible. Just inconvenient. The more he used the word tight, the more it sounded like code for difficult choice. Lauren started ramping up her messaging. She posted countdown stories, grateful for the chance to speak on a national stage. She tagged other realtors, used phrases like industry recognition and next level. She also started calling Dad more often. I know because he mentioned it casually. She's nervous, he told me one evening. Public speaking isn't easy. I know, I said. Neither is walking someone down the aisle. He didn't respond right away. A week later, he called while I was on base finishing paperwork. I need to be honest, he said. I'm looking at flights, and I might not be able to do both. I leaned back in my chair. Outside my office window, soldiers were loading equipment for a field exercise. everything moving in clear assigned directions. What do you mean, might I asked? Well, if Lauren's presentation runs long, is she the keynote? I interrupted. That's what she told me. Did you see it on the official agenda? He hesitated. I don't need to. She wouldn't lie about that. I rubbed my forehead. I'm not saying she would. I'm just asking. There it was again. That soft defensive tone that always came out when I questioned anything involving her. She's worked hard for this, he repeated. I could almost hear Lauren's phrasing in his voice. I kept my tone calm. So have I. Silence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list my deployments or awards. I just let that sentence sit there. So what are you saying? He asked. I'm saying my wedding date hasn't changed in a year. I know. And you already promised. I know. We stayed in that space for a few seconds. Not arguing. Just standing on opposite sides of the same fact. I don't want to disappoint either of you, he said finally. That line felt familiar, neutral, reasonable, and completely unfair. Because disappointment was not evenly distributed in this family. The next few days, the pressure became more subtle. My cousin texted me asking if I'd considered walking myself down the aisle. She said it like it was empowering. An old family friend commented on Lauren's post, "Your dad must be so proud to see you on that stage." Lauren replied with a heart emoji and wrote, "Couldn't do it without him." I stared at that comment longer than I should have. Couldn't do it without him. She had positioned him publicly as essential to her success on the same day he was supposed to stand beside me. That's not accidental timing. That's narrative control. Daniel noticed the shift before I did. One night while we were going over final seating arrangements, he put his pen down. Is this about your sister wanting your dad there, he asked? Or about her needing everyone to see him there? It was a sharp question. Lauren doesn't just compete privately. She performs. If Dad showed up at her conference, photos would go up. Smiling, proud father, successful daughter. If he showed up at my wedding, there would be no business gain. Just tradition. Family. A quiet moment no one could monetize. That difference matters to someone who measures life in impressions, ease, and engagement. 2 weeks before the wedding, Dad called again. His voice sounded tired. I've been thinking, he said. I braced myself. I don't think I can make it to both. There it was. No more might. You could come here first, I said evenly. There's an early morning flight to Dallas. You'd still be there before noon. It's not that simple. It actually was. What's not simple, I asked. Lauren's counting on me. The words landed harder than I expected. Wasn't I? He exhaled. You're strong. You don't need me in the same way. There it was. The story Lauren had been building for years. Independent. Self-sufficient. Fine on her own. I kept my voice steady. That's not the point. I know, he said quickly. I don't want to let her down. The thing about that sentence is, it assumes someone else will absorb the impact. I understand, I said again. This time I meant something different. Not that I agreed, but that I saw the pattern clearly. After we hung up, I didn't cry. Not right away. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled up the official website for the real estate summit in Dallas. Speakers were listed alphabetically. I scrolled slowly. Her name wasn't there. I refreshed the page. Still not there. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Conferences update agendas all the time. Maybe it hadn't been updated yet, but I didn't feel confused. I felt certain, not about what she had done, but about what she was willing to do. And that certainty changed something in me that had been soft for a long time. That certainty sat heavy in my chest as I closed my laptop and stared at the blank wall in front of me. I didn't call Lauren. I didn't screenshot the speaker list and send it to Dad. I didn't confront anyone. I waited. 3 days later, Dad called again. I knew before I answered. His voice had that careful tone people use when they've already made a decision and are trying to soften it. I've booked my flight, he said. My stomach tightened. Okay, I'm flying to Dallas the night before. Lauren's presentation starts at 9. There's no way I can make it to Denver in time after that. There it was. No more maybe. No more tight logistics. Just a choice. You could come here first, I said quietly. There's a 6 a.m. flight from Denver to Dallas. You'd still make it. He didn't argue with the schedule. He didn't say I was wrong. It's not just about timing, he replied. Of course it wasn't. It's about what I asked. She's nervous, he said. She needs support. The sentence landed like a familiar weight. So do I answered. He went silent. For a second, I thought he might reconsider. I thought maybe the simplicity of that truth would shift something. Instead, he said, "You're not alone. You have Daniel. You have his family." There it was again. The narrative that I was the stable one. The one who would be fine. "I wanted you," I said. "I know. Then why are you not coming?" Another long pause. I don't want to disappoint her. It was almost identical to the last call. Same phrasing. Same reasoning. Except this time it wasn't hypothetical. "I understand," I said, and I meant it differently now. He took that as acceptance. I could hear the relief in his voice. He started talking about sending a gift, about watching the ceremony online if we streamed it. I let him talk. When the call ended, I stayed seated at the table for a long time. Not crying, not shaking, just still. The part of me that had hoped he would choose differently finally went quiet. That night, Daniel found me sitting on the edge of the bed, still in my work clothes. "He's not coming," I said. Daniel didn't ask for details. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat beside me. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, then shook my head. "It's not just about the wedding," I said. "It's the pattern." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Then stop letting the pattern decide who you are." It sounded simple. It wasn't. The next morning at 0600, I was at formation. Cold Colorado air. Soldiers in lines. Routine. No one there knew that my father had just chosen my sister's conference over my wedding. They knew me as Captain Whitfield, the one who expected accountability, the one who double-checked timelines. I ran through PT like muscle memory. Push-ups, sprints, commands. The Army doesn't pause because your feelings are hurt. After formation, I went to my office and signed off on supply requests for an upcoming field exercise. I reviewed a convoy schedule. I answered emails. It was strange how normal everything felt. Around noon, my phone buzzed. "Lauren." I let it go to voicemail. A text followed. "I heard you talk to Dad. I know this is hard, but this is a huge opportunity for me. I thought you of all people would understand ambition." Ambition. As if my wedding was some optional hobby. I typed a response and deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I sent one sentence. "I hope your presentation goes well." She responded with a thumbs up. That was it. Later that evening, I went back to the real estate conference website. I checked the speakers again. Still no name. I clicked through breakout sessions. Panels, workshops. Nothing. I searched social media for the event hashtag. Photos were already being posted from pre-conference networking dinners. No promotional posts featuring Lauren. I wasn't looking to expose her. Not yet. I just needed to know if I was crazy. The answer was no. The following weekend, we had dinner with Daniel's parents. They asked about final plans. His mom asked what time my dad was arriving. "Dallas," I said evenly. "He'll be in Dallas." They didn't pry. They didn't offer forced sympathy. They just nodded and kept passing the bread. That normalcy almost broke me more than the cancellation. On the drive home, Daniel reached over and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to pretend this doesn't hurt," he said. "I'm not pretending," I replied. "I'm adjusting." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet shift. For years, I'd operated under the assumption that if I was patient enough, accomplished enough, stable enough, the balance would even out. But that balance wasn't neutral. It tilted toward whoever claimed need first. And Lauren had mastered that skill. A few days later, Dad emailed me his flight confirmation to Dallas. He added a line at the bottom. "I'm proud of you. I hope you know that." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Pride without presence. It's easy to type. Harder to live. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I opened my leave paperwork and confirmed the dates. 10 days off. No distractions. No adjustments. Just a wedding. And for the first time since Daniel proposed, I stopped planning around whether my father would walk beside me and started asking myself what it would look like if he didn't. I printed my leave form and walked it down the hallway to battalion like it was any other routine task. The Army doesn't care why you take leave. It just cares that the paperwork is correct. Date, signatures, accountability. Simple. I knocked on the XO's door first. He skimmed the form. "Wedding?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He nodded. "About time. You've got the exercise wrapped up. Just make sure your handoff notes are clean." They will be. No drama. No follow-up questions. In uniform, my life made sense. I took the signed form upstairs to brigade. Colonel Holloway's office door was open. He was reviewing a folder, reading glasses halfway down his nose. He's the kind of officer who doesn't waste words. You know where you stand with him. He motioned me in. Captain Whitfield. What do you need? Leave form, sir. He scanned it, paused at the dates. Big day. Yes, sir. He signed without hesitation, then looked up. Everything squared away. It was a standard question. Operational, not emotional. I hesitated just long enough for him to notice. My father won't be attending, I said evenly. He didn't react dramatically. No raised eyebrows. No sympathy performance. That's unfortunate, he said. Yes, sir. He set the pen down. You've handled worse. That almost made me laugh. Yes, sir. He slid the form back across the desk. Make sure you enjoy the day. Don't let anyone steal it. It was a simple statement, but it stayed with me. Don't let anyone steal it. Back in my office, I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. Lauren had been trying to shape the narrative for weeks, positioning herself as the one with momentum, framing me as the independent one who didn't need traditional gestures. But independence isn't immunity. That night I finally cried. Not dramatic movie scene crying. Just quiet tears sitting on the bathroom floor because I didn't want Daniel to hear me from the living room. I wasn't crying about logistics. I wasn't even crying about Lauren. I was grieving the version of my father I kept hoping would show up. When I walked out 20 minutes later, Daniel was sitting on the couch pretending not to have heard anything. He looked up carefully. You want to talk? I wanted him to choose me without being forced, I said. Daniel nodded. That's reasonable. I don't want to beg. Then don't. That was the line. For years I had tried to be low maintenance, strong, understanding, the daughter who didn't make things harder. And somehow that translated into being the daughter who could absorb disappointment. The next morning I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Lauren about the conference website. I wasn't going to send Dad screenshots. I wasn't going to demand proof. If he wanted to verify, he would. If he didn't, that was information too. At work, we started final planning for the upcoming field exercise. Convoy routes, equipment manifests, backup vehicles in case of breakdowns. I caught myself thinking about redundancy. In logistics, you always plan for primary and alternate. If one route fails, you don't cancel the mission. You adapt. That thought settled in quietly. Primary Dad walks me down the aisle. Alternate. I didn't fill it in yet. Later that week, Lauren posted another countdown video. 3 days until I take the stage, she wrote. Take the stage. There was something theatrical about the phrasing. I zoomed into the background of her video. It looked like her apartment. Same kitchen island. Same art on the wall. Not a hotel room, not a conference center. Maybe she was pre-recording. Maybe she was excited. Or maybe she assumed no one would look closely. Dad texted me that evening. Flight confirmed. Dallas, Friday night. No mention of the wedding. I replied with a thumbs up. He followed with, I hope you know I love you. I stared at the message. Love without presence feels abstract. Safe. Easy to claim. I typed back, I know. Because technically I did. That didn't mean I wasn't done waiting for proof. A few days before the wedding, Daniel and I finalized the ceremony order with the planner. She asked gently, who will be walking you down? There was a pause. I could feel Daniel watching me. For now, I said, leave it open. The planner nodded, professional and discreet. On the drive home, Daniel asked, do you have someone in mind? I'm thinking, I said. The truth was, I didn't want to make that decision out of anger. I didn't want it to feel like retaliation. I wanted it to feel intentional. At PT, the next morning, we ran sprints across the field. Cold air in my lungs. Soldiers counting reps. In the Army, when something breaks, you don't stand there wishing it worked differently. You find another way. That afternoon, I drafted an email I never sent. It was addressed to Dad. I wrote, if you change your mind, I'll save you a seat. Then I deleted it, not because I didn't mean it, but because I wasn't going to ask again. That night, I pulled up the conference website one more time. The speaker list had been updated. Still no Lauren. I closed my laptop slowly. Primary route was no longer reliable, and I was done pretending I didn't need an alternate. I closed my laptop and sat there for a while, staring at my own reflection in the dark screen. Primary route was no longer reliable, so I stopped thinking like a daughter and started thinking like an officer. In the Army, you don't wait for a broken plan to magically fix itself. You assign responsibility and move forward. The next morning, I walked into brigade headquarters with something heavier than a leave form on my mind. Colonel Holloway was reviewing a stack of evaluations when I knocked. "Come in," he said without looking up. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. "Sir, do you have a minute?" He set the folder down. "I do." I stood at attention out of habit, then relaxed slightly when he gestured toward the chair. "This isn't operational," I said. "It's personal." He waited. "My father won't be at my wedding." I gathered that he replied calmly, "I don't want to walk alone." There. Direct. No emotional speech. No dramatic pause. He studied me for a second, not in a curious way, more like he was assessing intent. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" he said. "Yes, sir." The room was quiet. No music swelling in the background. Just the faint hum of the HVAC system. "I would be honored," he said simply. No hesitation. No performance. And that's when it hit me that the difference between him and my father wasn't love. It was reliability. "Thank you, sir," I said. Outside of uniform, he added, "This is your day, not a recruiting video." A small smile slipped out before I could stop it. Understood. We shook hands, firm, professional. As I walked out of his office, I felt something unfamiliar. Not relief, stability. That afternoon, I told Daniel. He didn't look surprised. "That makes sense," he said. "He's shown up for you more than most people." It wasn't a criticism, just a fact. We updated the planner. She paused when I gave her the name. "Your commanding officer." "Yes, that's actually really beautiful," she said. I shrugged. He keeps his promises. Word travels fast in military circles. But I made it clear I didn't want it turned into some symbolic spectacle. No dress blues, no salutes. Just a man walking beside me because he chose to. Meanwhile, Lauren's social media countdown hit 24 hours. "Dallas, here I come." She posted from what looked like an airport lounge. The angle of the photo was tight. No visible gate numbers. No boarding screen in the background. I noticed details without meaning to. Dad texted me that night. "Boarding soon." I stared at the message for a long time. He was flying toward the wrong event and had no idea. I didn't correct him. I didn't forward screenshots. I didn't send the speaker list. If he wanted to verify, he would. The morning before the wedding, Daniel and I dropped off final decor items at the venue. The garden looked calm. Chairs lined up neatly. White floral arrangements, simple and clean. No chaos, no drama. The rehearsal dinner that night was warm and easy. Daniel's parents toasted us. His mom squeezed my hand and said she was proud of the woman I'd become. No one mentioned Dallas. Back in our apartment later that evening, I laid my dress out carefully on the closet door. Lace, clean lines, nothing dramatic. Daniel stood behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You good?" he asked. "I will be," I answered. And I meant it. I checked my phone one last time before bed. Lauren had posted a story from what looked like a hotel room. She was holding a folder and smiling into the camera. "Big morning tomorrow," she wrote. I zoomed in on the folder. Blank cover. No conference logo. It didn't matter. What mattered was that tomorrow at 4 o'clock, I would walk down that aisle with someone who had never once made me feel like I was an optional commitment. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Colorado sunlight filtered through the curtains. My chest felt tight but steady. Bridesmaids started arriving around 9. Hair, makeup, laughter. My phone buzzed around 10. A text from Dad. "Big day for both my girls." I read it twice. Both my girls. Equal phrasing. Balanced, neutral. I typed back, "Safe travels." At noon, Colonel Holloway sent a brief message. "On my way." Simple. Reliable. As the afternoon moved closer to ceremony time, nerves replaced analysis. I stood in front of the mirror while my maid of honor adjusted my veil. For years, I'd believed that strength meant not needing anyone. But standing there, dressed for one of the biggest moments of my life, I realized strength is choosing who gets to stand beside you. Not because they're obligated, but because they show up. Outside guests were taking their seats. Music started softly in the background. Someone knocked gently on the bridal suite door. I turned, knowing exactly who it would be. I walked to the door and opened it myself. Colonel Holloway stood there in a dark suit instead of a uniform tie, straight posture exactly the same as it always was on base. He looked slightly out of place in a botanical garden hallway, but not uncomfortable. "You ready, Captain?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. He offered his arm. No speech, no sentimental build-up, just steady presence. We walked slowly down the short hallway toward the entrance to the garden. Through the glass doors, I could see rows of chairs filled with family and friends. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the aisle. For a brief second, the absence hit me. The empty space where my father should have been waiting. The image I had pictured since I was 14. Then the music shifted, signaling it was time. The doors opened. Conversations softened into a quiet hum. Guests turned. I felt eyes on me, but not judgment. Just attention. Colonel Holloway's arm was solid under my hand. Not stiff, not ceremonial. Just there. As we stepped forward, I kept my chin level and my breathing steady. Years of standing at attention helped. Halfway down the aisle, I noticed Daniel's expression. He wasn't scanning the crowd for who was missing. He was looking at me like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That steadied me more than anything else. There were a few whispers when people recognized who was beside me. A couple of raised eyebrows. Nothing dramatic. If anyone thought it was strange, they kept it to themselves. When we reached the front, Colonel Holloway gave my hand a brief squeeze. "Proud of you," he said quietly. "Thank you," I replied. He stepped aside and took his seat in the front row. No spotlight, no applause, just movement. The ceremony began. Our officiant kept it simple, personal, but not theatrical. Daniel and I exchanged vows we had written ourselves. Honest, direct, no exaggerated promises, just commitment. At one point, I caught a glimpse of Daniel's parents in the front row, both smiling in a way that felt uncomplicated. That kind of uncomplicated support used to feel foreign to me. Now it felt normal. When we exchanged rings, my hands didn't shake. When we kissed, the crowd cheered in that warm, relieved way people do when they've been emotionally invested for the right reasons. We walked back up this aisle together as husband and wife. No one was looking around for who hadn't come. At the reception, the energy shifted from solemn to celebratory. String lights overhead, long tables, simple centerpieces, laughter. I allowed myself to relax. For a few hours, I didn't think about Dallas. Daniel and I moved from table to table thanking guests. My aunt hugged me and whispered, "You look strong. Not beautiful. Not glowing. Strong." I smiled. That's the goal. At one point, I stepped outside for air. The late evening air was cooler now. I checked my phone out of habit. Multiple missed calls. From Dad. My stomach tightened. There was also a short text. "Call me." No explanation. I stared at it for a second. The timing was odd. His message came during what should have been Lauren's supposed speaking slot. I didn't call back immediately. Instead, I walked back inside. Daniel was at the bar talking to friends from college. The DJ had started the First Dance playlist. Glasses clinked. Plates were being cleared. For the first time all day, I felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Not about my marriage, that felt solid. About the ripple effect of whatever was happening 3 states away. 10 minutes later, I heard a shift in the room's volume. It wasn't loud. Just a change. The kind that happens when someone unexpected walks in. I turned toward the entrance. My father was standing just inside the reception tent, suit slightly wrinkled, tie loosened. He looked like someone who had been traveling fast. For a split second, I thought I was imagining him. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. People near the entrance moved aside instinctively, creating a clear line between us. He walked forward slowly. No smile. No defensive posture. Just focus. I felt Daniel step closer beside me. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know yet," I answered. Dad stopped a few feet away. "I need to talk to you," he said. His voice was low controlled, not angry and frantic. I looked around. Conversations had faded. Heads were turning discreetly. "This isn't the place," I said. "It is," he replied. That caught me off guard. He glanced toward the DJ, then toward the small microphone stand set up near the head table for toasts. "I need everyone to hear this." The room had gone almost completely quiet now. Even the waitstaff paused. For years I had imagined a version of this day where my father wasn't present at all. I had not imagined this. He walked toward the microphone. No one stopped him. No one asked questions. He picked it up, tapped it once to make sure it was on. The feedback hum cut through the air, and then he took a breath. He didn't look at the crowd when he started speaking. He looked at me. "I owe my daughter an apology," he said. The words were steady, not loud, not theatrical. A few guests shifted in their seats. Glasses were set down. The DJ quietly lowered the background music until it stopped completely. I was supposed to be here from the beginning, he continued. And I wasn't. No dramatic pause. No attempt to soften it. I chose to be somewhere else today. I thought I was supporting something important. He swallowed once. I was wrong. The room stayed silent. Not uncomfortable. Just attentive. I was in Dallas this morning, he said. At a real estate conference. A few people nodded faintly, already aware of the supposed conflict. My older daughter told me she was a keynote speaker. He let that sentence hang for a moment. She wasn't. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Not loud enough to be called a reaction. Just recognition. I checked the official agenda when I got there, he continued. Her name wasn't on it. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't move. I asked the event staff. They confirmed she was registered as an attendee. He took a breath. When I confronted her, she told me the speaking slot had been moved. I asked to see the confirmation email. Another pause. There wasn't one. Someone in the back let out a soft exhale. I realized I had been given a version of events that wasn't true, he said. And I had made a decision based on that version. He finally glanced toward the guests before returning his focus to me. For years I've told myself I was trying to avoid disappointing either of my daughters. He gave a small, humorless shake of his head. What I was really doing was letting one of them control the narrative. The phrase landed hard. Narrative. He had figured it out. I missed my younger daughter's commissioning ceremony, he continued. I missed her deployment send-off. I missed moments that mattered. Each sentence was short, direct, no embellishment. I told myself she was strong, independent, that she didn't need me the way her sister did. He looked down briefly, then back up. That was easier to believe than admitting I wasn't paying attention. The honesty was uncomfortable. Real. I booked the first flight out of Dallas when I understood what had happened, he said. Not because I deserved to be here, but because I should have been here from the start. No applause followed. No dramatic reaction, just stillness. He lowered the microphone slightly and looked directly at me. I am sorry, he said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. But it wasn't private either. He had chosen to say it in front of everyone. For years, most of our family dynamics had happened in side conversations. Phone calls, text threads, implications. This wasn't that. I walked toward him slowly. My heels clicked against the floor in the quiet space. When I reached him, I didn't hug him right away. Did you verify it yourself? I asked quietly, not into the microphone. Yes, he said. In person. Did she admit it? She tried to deflect, he answered. Then she stopped arguing. That sounded accurate. I studied his face. He looked tired. Not defeated, just older. You still made a choice, I said. I did, he replied. And I chose wrong. The room heard that. Not because he shouted it, but because he didn't soften it. I nodded once. You can stay, I said. It wasn't forgiveness. It was permission. He lowered the microphone fully and stepped back from it. There was no dramatic embrace, no crying collapse. He reached out carefully as if unsure of the boundaries, and I let him hug me. It was brief, controlled. When we separated, Daniel stepped forward and shook his hand. Firm, civil. Glad you made it, Daniel said. Me too, my father replied. Conversation slowly resumed around us. The DJ hesitated, then restarted the music at a lower volume. People returned to their tables, though their expressions had shifted. The air felt different, not explosive, not chaotic, clarified. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed in my hand. Lauren. I didn't answer. A text followed almost immediately. I can't believe he did that. No apology. No explanation. Just disbelief that the script had changed without her control. I put my phone face down on the table. My father took a seat at one of the side tables, not at the head table. He didn't assume a place of honor. For the rest of the evening, he stayed quiet. He congratulated Daniel's parents. He thanked Colonel Holloway. He watched the dances without trying to insert himself. At one point, he stepped outside briefly. I saw him through the glass doors, phone pressed to his ear. Lauren, most likely. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pace. He just stood still. When he came back inside, his expression was settled. The rest of the reception unfolded the way it should have from the beginning. Daniel and I danced. Friends gave short, light-hearted toasts. No one mentioned Dallas again, but the balance had shifted. For years, Lauren had been the one framing the story. Tonight, that framing had cracked, and the truth didn't need volume to carry weight. The music picked back up like nothing had happened, but the air felt different. Not tense, just honest. For the rest of the night, my father stayed in the background. He didn't try to give a second speech. He didn't retell what happened in Dallas. He congratulated Daniel quietly and thanked Colonel Holloway for stepping in. When he approached the colonel, I watched closely. "I appreciate you being there for her," my father said. "It wasn't complicated," Colonel Holloway replied. She asked. I showed up. No hostility, no competition, just fact. "That line stayed with me long after the reception ended," she asked. I showed up. Around midnight, Daniel and I finally left under a tunnel of sparklers. My father stood near the exit, clapping with everyone else. Not front and center, just present. As we got into the car, I felt something settle inside me. Not resolution, clarity. We flew to Greece the next morning for our honeymoon. For 10 days, I didn't think about conference agendas or family group chats. We walked through old cities, swam in clear water, and ate food that didn't come in a mess hall tray. But distance has a way of sharpening perspective. One evening, sitting on a balcony overlooking the sea, I finally listened to the voicemail my father had left the afternoon before the reception. I checked the agenda he had said in that message. I should have checked sooner. No excuses, no blaming logistics, just ownership. Back home in Colorado, reality resumed quickly. The first Monday after we returned, I was back in uniform at 0600. Field exercise prep didn't pause for weddings. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed. Lauren. I stepped outside before answering. "What was that?" she demanded the second I picked up. "It was the truth," I replied. "You embarrassed me. You embarrassed yourself." She went quiet for a beat. He didn't have to say it in front of everyone. He didn't have to miss my wedding either. Another pause. "You always make everything dramatic," she said. I almost laughed. "I didn't post fake speaking engagements," I answered. "It wasn't fake." "Then send me the official confirmation." Silence. "I don't owe you that." "You don't owe me anything," I said calmly. "But you owe Dad honesty." She changed tactics. "You've always needed to be the strong one. He just assumed you'd be fine." That assumption cost him. The conversation circled for a few more minutes. No resolution. No apology. Before hanging up, she said, "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "It just makes things clear." That afternoon, I called my financial advisor. Not my father. A separate one I'd been working with since my first deployment bonus. "I need to review any shared financial exposure," I said. He pulled up my file. Years earlier, I had co-signed a small business line of credit for Lauren when she was starting out. It wasn't massive, but my name was attached. "Can I remove myself?" I asked. "Only if she refinances without you," he said. "Otherwise, you're liable." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Then notify her formally that I won't renew or extend anything when it matures." He agreed. It wasn't revenge. It was risk management. Over the next few weeks, my father called more often. Not daily, but consistently. He didn't try to rehash the reception. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he asked about my work. Specific questions. How did the field exercise go? When's your next evaluation board? It was unfamiliar. Not in a bad way. Just new. One evening, he asked if we could meet halfway between Dallas and Denver for dinner. I agreed. We met at a restaurant in Oklahoma City. Neutral ground. He looked older than I remembered. "I should have verified things years ago," he said over dinner. "Not just this." I didn't interrupt. "I let your sister frame situations because it was easier than confronting conflict." "That's not neutral," I said. "That's a choice." "I know." We talked for 2 hours. Not about the wedding specifically. About patterns. About my mom. About how grief had shaped all of us differently. There was no instant healing. Trust doesn't rebuild in one apology. But there was accountability. Meanwhile, Lauren's situation started shifting. She needed to refinance the line of credit without my name. The bank required updated income documentation. Without the public perception of a keynote speech or major recognition, her numbers didn't look as strong as she had implied. She didn't call me for help. She called Dad. He told me about it later. "I can't keep smoothing everything over," he said. "That's not my call," I replied. "It's yours." 9 months after the wedding, Lauren sold her townhouse. Downsized. Claimed it was for flexibility. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I didn't gloat. I updated my beneficiary forms. Removed old automatic transfers I'd occasionally sent to help her bridge between deals. Boundaries aren't loud. They're administrative. 18 months after the wedding, I stood in formation again. This time for my promotion to major. Daniel was in the front row. So were his parents. And this time my father was there before the ceremony started. No rush, no dramatic entrance. Just present. When my name was called and my new rank pinned on, I didn't look around for who might be missing. I already knew who had chosen to show up. When the ceremony ended and people started moving toward the reception area on base, my father stayed close but not possessive. He shook Daniel's hand again. He thanked my battalion commander for taking care of her. It wasn't grand. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. After everyone cleared out, he and I stood off to the side near the flagpole. "You earned that," he said, nodding toward my new rank. "I did," I replied. He smiled slightly. "I know. There was a time when I would have waited for that acknowledgement. Needed it. That day it felt like an addition, not a requirement. Over the 18 months between my wedding and that promotion, things had shifted quietly but permanently. Lauren didn't disappear. She didn't apologize in some cinematic moment. She kept living her life. Posting updates, selling homes, reframing her townhouse sale as strategic downsizing. We saw each other once at Thanksgiving. She hugged me like nothing had happened. "Major now," she said with a thin smile. "Look at you." "Realtor still," I replied evenly. "Look at you." It wasn't hostile. It wasn't warm. It was clear. Boundaries had replaced expectation. After the wedding, when I formally withdrew from any future financial guarantees, she sent a short email. I thought families supported each other. I responded once. Family doesn't mislead each other. No argument followed. My father and I started doing something we hadn't done in years. We talked without Lauren present. Sometimes about work, sometimes about my mom, sometimes about nothing important. He didn't try to overcorrect by showing up at every minor event. He didn't flood me with calls. He just showed up consistently when he said he would. Consistency builds trust in small deposits. One afternoon, about a year after the wedding, he admitted something. "I let myself believe you didn't need me because it excused my absence," he said. "That wasn't fair," I replied. "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." We didn't dissect it for hours. We didn't turn it into therapy in a restaurant booth. We just let the truth exist without defensiveness. That was new. Daniel noticed it too. "You're different around him now," he said one evening after a phone call. "How?" "You're not bracing." He was right. For years, every interaction with my father had felt like a negotiation. Would he show up? Would he choose differently? Would I be disappointed again? Now the dynamic had shifted. Not because Lauren changed. Because I did. I stopped competing for space. I stopped accepting the role of the strong one who doesn't need anything. I asked for what I wanted. Once, clearly. If it wasn't given, I adjusted. That was the real revenge. Not humiliation. Not public collapse. Clarity. Lauren still frames stories online. She still posts carefully angled photos and captions about hustle. But the leverage she once had the ability to shape how my father saw me doesn't hold the same weight. He verifies now. That might sound small, but it isn't. A few months after my promotion, we all ended up at the same extended family barbecue in Pennsylvania. Lauren was telling a group of relatives about a major listing opportunity. I watched as my father listened, nodding. Then he asked calmly, "Is that officially confirmed?" It wasn't accusatory, just direct. She paused. "I mean, it's likely." He nodded once. "Let me know when it's finalized." That was it. No fight, no scene. Just a boundary in real time. Later that afternoon, he sat beside me on the back porch while kids ran around the yard. "I should have done that years ago," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. He didn't argue. As for me, life moved forward the way it does. Field exercises. New responsibilities. Late nights reviewing reports. Early mornings in formation. Marriage. Grocery lists. Shared calendars. Normal arguments about who forgot to refill the coffee filters. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just stability. Sometimes people ask if I regret letting my father speak at the reception. If I wish it had stayed private. I don't. Public accountability changed something that private apologies never could. Not because it embarrassed Lauren, because it removed the shadow version of events she had relied on. There was no room left for reinterpretation. My wedding day didn't get ruined. It got clarified. My father didn't collapse. He adjusted. And I didn't walk alone. I walked with someone who showed up. That turned out to matter more than tradition. Family isn't about who speaks first or loudest. It's about who stands beside you when the doors open and the music starts. And when I look back at that aisle now, I don't see who wasn't there. I see exactly who was. Looking back, I don't see my wedding day as the day my sister tried to ruin something. I see it as the day the truth finally stood in the open. Family drama doesn't always explode. Sometimes it builds quietly over years, shaped by small choices and unchallenged stories. What changed everything wasn't revenge in the loud sense. It was accountability. It was someone verifying the facts. It was me deciding I wouldn't compete for love anymore. In the end, this wasn't just a wedding story. It was a family revenge story in the most real way possible. Not about destroying someone, about stepping out of a pattern that was quietly destroying you. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply building a life so solid that no one can manipulate your place in it again. If you connect with stories about family drama, hard truths, and quiet strength, make sure you subscribe. This channel is for people who've lived through complicated family dynamics and came out stronger. There's more real-life family revenge stories and military life stories ahead, and you won't want to miss them.